Today, what we're going to do is go through a little bit of a train the trainer session. Um, some of the points I brought up, in those little bits I did at the end of every one of the 7 days, but I think it's good that we kind of circle back and go through it all. I've also asked another person to join us who's on the screen, and that's Shona. Say hello, Shona.
Morning, or good afternoon, and good evening. I'd like to say
That's
all.
right. So Shona is an hour ahead of me up in Toronto and is the vice chair of the Feed the Planet committee with Worldchefs. And the reason I've asked her to join, aside from being vice chair today, is that she has spent a lot of time with this curriculum at the university that she teaches at in Toronto and has a lot of experience with it. So I'm going to ask her to kind of weigh in a little bit as we go along, just to give her some real, real world advice experience, what are the students thinking, etc. So Shona, a million thank yous for joining us today.
No problem. Glad to be here.
So with that, in interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and jump into sharing my screen. And by the way, today, as I'm going to try to leave some time at the end for questions. So hang on, there we go. And so please do send your presentation or your questions as you think of them, and I'll try to sift through them a little bit, and if we don't get to them, I can always answer them later on. So with that, welcome, and here we go. So first of all, just as a quick background, this is, we are Feed the Planet. Feed the Planet committee does a lot of things. That is actually a photo of the Feed the Planet committee that involves not only the folks from Worldchefs, but also from Electrolux and from ISEC, as we meet in Custom Culinary, as we meet in Paris for that meeting. That's in the Worldchefs office, the International Worldchefs office, to discuss what we're doing and how we do it and all of that. So, what we're going to talk about today is the sustainability education. The sustainability education is part of what we do. And just to give you the bigger picture, what we do is, we're kind of the sustainability philanthropic arm, if you will, of Worldchefs, which is something I'm super proud of, and I think we all as Worldchefs members can be very, very proud of. The kind of things that we work on is the sustainability education, which we're going to talk about today, but also things like Food Heroes, the Food Heroes Challenge, the Food Waste Challenge, and Like a Chef. And I covered those briefly during the 7 days. But I encourage you to go to the Feed the Planet website and just sort of check those out again, because they really, they dovetail, they connect to the information that we'll be talking about today. And as you're doing the as you're teaching this curriculum, you may want to reference some of the things we're doing, like, the Like a Chef program that's teaching people who are, from difficult circumstances, how to enter our food service world for employment, for money. The Food Waste Challenge, which is challenging people in the restaurants to lower their food waste. And as we saw in the 7-part series, everything is connected. And if you work on food waste, you are also then working on the agricultural system and climate change, and all of that's connected. And of course, the Food Heroes Challenge, which is taking the power of the white jacket and teaching children about sustainability and food waste. So anyways, take a look at that. It's we're really proud of what we do. It's a huge amount of work, etc. So let me take a couple steps backwards, just to give you a little bit of a sense of where we started and where this all sort of began. And for those of you who maybe were with us in Norway in 2016, you may have remembered the speaker on the left and the panel that was below there. The speaker on the left is Julian Cribb, and he was one of our keynote speakers. Julian Cribb wrote a book that I highly encourage you all to read, called The Coming Famine. It was one of the books that shaped my thinking about sustainability. Exceptionally well-researched book. And in the book, he really chronicles where this world is going, and looking at all of the statistics and painting a picture which is pretty scary, actually, if we don't act. And at that Congress, at the end of his presentation, he made a pretty impactful challenge to all of us as chefs to get involved and to use the power of the white jacket to change the world that we live in. And it was really after that that, I mean, we had been working on it a little before that as well, but it was really at that moment that we all kind of said, we need to do more and we need to take a stand as chefs. And that's where this all started. And excuse me, what we did is we then created, among other things, the first thing we did actually is we created this curriculum. And the curriculum was a challenge, because how do you develop a curriculum for the world? That's not an easy thing to do. How do you develop it so it's not too in depth, that we lose people and it takes far too long, because you can talk about sustainability for weeks and months, years, but at the same time give enough material that it matters, that it leaves people educated and empowered. How do you make it globally relevant so it means something to somebody in Australia and India and Finland and Wales and Canada? How do you do that? And then of course, it was designed for culinary education, so for schools, but also for chefs. And I think we'll talk a little bit about that today in the shorter curriculum that we'll be discussing. Again, not too long, but long enough. How do you make it flexible? How do you make it customizable? And these were all the things that we grappled with, and it took quite a while to build this, and it's something we're very proud of. So to do it, we engaged a lot of experts. As we talked about when we went through the 7-part series, there's so much in the world of sustainability. Who is an expert in aquaculture and agriculture and climate and garbage and energy and water? I mean, it is such a big topic. And so one of the first things we did is we reached out to experts, and the experts helped us write this curriculum. And some of the people are listed there. These are incredibly knowledgeable people in the areas in which they work. And so the material that we have is really the result of their brain power. It's not like I sat down and wrote this, or that Shona and I just, on an afternoon said, let's put this together. I mean, this was really going to the experts. And along the way, I know that I learned a lot from them. We also have the partner support. Feed the Planet is a partnership. It's Electrolux, the Electrolux Food Foundation, it's ISIC, and it's Custom Culinary. We all work together on this, and they also help provide the funding to make this possible, quite frankly, which is huge, and we're deeply appreciative to them. So at the end of all this, what did we have? We developed a curriculum. The curriculum was, as you've seen, 7 parts. Introduction to kind of the big issues: agricultural, animal husbandry, seafood, energy, water, waste. And along with that, because in the initial product we put out there, the longer curriculum, it's a 2 to 3 hour per session class. So I mean, the 7 days is 14 14 to 21 hours of instruction. There's a lot of material there. And in addition to the PowerPoints, which you didn't see that, you saw the shorter one, but in addition to the PowerPoints, we also developed out detailed lesson plans, detailed assessments, quizzes, lots of additional resources, additional activities, et cetera, et cetera. And it was really designed to be, here is an entire course which you can put into a culinary school and teach it. And I, it was successful, but I think where it maybe wasn't successful is that it really wasn't used outside of schools very much. And even for a lot of schools, it was a pretty daunting task to put all that in. And Shona, I'm just going to ask you to sort of chime in right now, because you spent a lot of, we're going to talk about the customization piece in a little bit, but you spent a lot of time, really taking it and making it Canada specific and teaching it. So maybe if you just want to give a few sort of, your experience in teaching it, you've taught it a whole bunch. Just give us your experiences a little bit.
Yeah, so I was very fortunate because I was able to take this course and put it right into curriculum. It became one of the competencies here in Ontario, in Canada, that cooks had to have as part of their trade is sustainability. So it's like, yay, I get to put it in super easily, no red tape, and put it in. And I made it a 7-week course with 4 hours each week. So I had lots of time to play with. So I took things like agriculture and worked with we have an arboretum and a tree program right on our campus. So we worked with them so that the students could go out and learn about seeding and planting so they could get their hands in it really, because we know they're visual people, and they could start to do things as well and then do assignments and then start to see the big picture. And then you could go to really higher thinking sort of ways of learning about these things. Same with animal husbandry. I brought in farmers that we knew from the local area in Ontario. We talked about what the landscape is literally and figuratively, as far as how animals are being treated and what you can do and how you can utilize them best. We brought in a fish and seafood expert. It's a program in Canada for fishing and farming sustainably. So we have OceanWise come in and they share, and our students actually become ambassadors. So we took the pieces that were already there and we made it as Canadian as we could. Right? I did. I wanted our students to have, for it to have relevance, for them to take this out into the industry so that when they meet chefs who really don't know a lot about this right now because they're too busy in the industry working, they can share what they've learned from college to them, not in an arrogant sort of way, but in a way that could help motivate them. I teach them, that every choice matters. I teach them that it can help them with their profits, so they start to listen, and the grown-ups in the room start to listen as well, and they feel that they have input, and it starts to change, right? So that's some of the.
Awesome. No, that's really great. And just a couple things there to call out, which is
Yep.
Is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in Canada, the government actually mandated that you
Yeah.
had to teach sustainability.
Yes, yes. So it became one of the competencies, like you have to learn how to make mother sauces and you have to know how to do butchery. You also have to know now about sustainability in the food service industry. It is mandated as part of what they have to learn. So everyone has to do it, but most people are doing it in a small, not so meaningful way. So I've been trying to share this and, grow it across Canada. Slowly, it's coming.
That's great. And Shona has done such a wonderful job on this because, as I said, it's important to connect with local experts. And she's done that in a really great way. So, it's my hope that many schools in Canada will follow your lead. and I know that's yours also, but, but this is something just to sort of draw on that one point about the governmental piece. In a lot of countries, as sustainability becomes a bigger and bigger and more important competency, more important skill that is expected, we at Worldchefs effectively have built solutions so that, if somebody says to you in your culinary schools or maybe in your employment that, because sometimes even like in hotels or, larger restaurants, somebody in marketing may say, we really need to train our people in sustainability. Great, we have the program for you. It's ready to use. So Shona, thank you.
No problem.
That's great. So this is kind of the way that the curriculum is laid out. This is a little bit of the philosophy. And we talked about this also on the 7-day thing, but just to go back to this for a minute, this is the concept of the bullseye. And the way that this works is that in every day that you teach, ideally you start with the big picture, what's happening in the world. There's lots of statistics in the presentation about what's going on and, what is the water usage and energy usage and what's happening in the world of fisheries, etc. There's lots of information on a global scale. The reason for that is to drive home the point that we are all connected, that this is a globally connected world. And it's not just the question of what happens where you live. It's how where you live is connected to where somebody else lives, which is connected to where somebody else lives. And it's really meant to get the attention of the people who are watching, or who are being taught, so that they like, they kind of go, wow, I had no idea of the state of global fisheries, for instance. The next step in on the circle is for you to take it regionally. And that's, what Shona was just talking about, which is, what's happening in Canada, what's happening in Toronto. For those of you here, what's happening in Mexico, what's happening in India, what's happening in the Philippines. And this is where, we'll talk about this in a little bit, this is where you need to do some additional work. This is the one part of our presentation that we couldn't build out on a global basis because it's impossible. It's the world's too big. So what we ask of the teachers, what we ask of you is that before you teach it, you take some time to look at what's happening in your region. Because if the people you're teaching see the global basis and don't understand the local regional, it doesn't really empower them to change as much. So the next layer in is food service. So, why are we talking about it in the world of chefing, in the world of food? And this is really, again, very important, because what it does is remember from the day one of our presentation, there's a slide in there that says, why food service? And the reality is we buy a lot of food, we set we set food trends, we use a lot of energy, we use a lot of water, and we produce a lot of waste. And that alone is reason enough that we in food service need to be aware. And so in the food service world, then we start to ask questions about, okay, well, what does seafood mean for us as chefs? And what does energy mean for us as chefs? The last layer in the middle is you, the individual. And this is really where every class should wind up. And we'll talk about this, which is, so what about you? What are you going to do? And I think Shona said it, very well, which is it's about every choice matters. And that is a really critical theme to drive home to all of the people that you're teaching, is that, whether you take a plastic container and recycle it or not seems like a small decision, but when taken with, in a comprehensive view of all the other people in the world who are making the same decision, it becomes an important decision. So always end with the you question. So in 2017, we launched the course I was just talking about, which is this longer product, which is 7 days, 2 to 3 hours per class. Shona made it 4 hours per class because she's an overachiever, but 2 to 3 hours per class. And if this is the product that you're interested in, and by the way, when I say product, it's not that, this is all free, just to be clear. Everything is free. There's no cost associated with anything, because the idea here is to get it out to lots of people. But you get the class sessions, you get the additional materials, all the lesson plans, all the, activities, quizzes, all that stuff. It is customizable. And the people who have worked on this course have done some customization to it. Now, the important part there is when you customize, we need to know what that is, just because it's a Worldchefs thing. So, if you're putting in, graphs about seafood in Canada, well, we'd like to know about that. So we give you fairly advanced assessment protocols, and upon completion, the students will receive a graduate certification and badge for the comprehensive sustainability curriculum. So they get sort of credit for that longer curriculum. The one that we spent time on a few weeks ago was the shortened curriculum. And that is the second product we came out with, and we launched it this year in 2020. And really, the idea here was we got a lot of feedback from people that, 14 to 21 hours is a lot, and people don't have that time, especially in the industry. Chefs don't have that time, cooks don't have that time, and in culinary schools, a lot of times there just isn't enough room to put in a larger class. And so we came up with a shortened product, which we believe is ideal for culinary schools. It's ideal for the industry. There's no reason in the world you couldn't teach it to a group of restaurants. And it's ideal for chef societies. There's no reason in the world that we can't teach this to the chef societies where you live, to the local chapters. It's short enough that you can do it. We are still 7 class sessions, as you saw. They're roughly 45 minutes per class. We don't really think at this point that they're customizable because of the shortened sort of nature of it. We do give you assessment protocols, and that is basically a final quiz online. And if you pass that, I mean, not you, but the people you're teaching, if they pass it at 80%, then what do they get? They get the participant certification and badge of the introductory sustainability curriculum. So that's the way that that one works. Again, it's meant to be easier to deliver, a little bit shorter, etc. Now, for those of you who are teaching it, you also get credit for this. And we want to be sure, because again, this is, when you teach it, that's a level of commitment that's, above and beyond. And we want to be sure that you get the credit for that. So the deal is this: once we're done with this training, we're going to talk about sort of next steps. But when you teach your first class, you will get a trainer badge, and you will get a trainer badge. Basically, it's valid for a year. So as long as you're teaching, you'll have it year after year after year, and you will get a certificate for every class that you teach. We want to be sure that you are recognized for your contribution to this effort. So let's talk a little bit about the curriculum in general here, and some of the specifics about teaching it. So the first is, and I think we talked a little bit about this already, which is it's important to connect the dots from world to local to food service to individual. Remember, that's that concentric circle, and you really want to connect all of that. And how do you do that? And this is where we ask you to do the work. It's finding local statistics. It's finding local organizations that may be active where you live, that may be doing things already in the world of agriculture or in animal husbandry or seafood or whatever it may be, so that you can use them as resources. It is looking for local experts. Not only local experts who maybe could visit, your, sessions, which may or may not be possible due to the length that you may have to teach it, but local experts that you can talk to. They're there to help you be a better teacher. So, if there's somebody in your area of the world who is doing, very sustainable agriculture, maybe spend a little time talking to that person and learning about what their issues are, because that's something then that you can relate to your students. Local chefs, a lot of times there are chefs among us who are doing great things. They're not always the chefs who are the most famous. Sometimes they're doing it very quietly. Find those chefs and use them as examples. Show their menus. And that's important, because what that communicates to the people you're teaching is that these aren't just ideas that are sort of over here somewhere, but actually they're doable, and that they are and people are being successful with it, which means they can also. So it's really important to find those local chefs and local examples. Please take the time to digest the information. There is a lot of information in these PowerPoints. So before you launch into teaching, allow yourself the time to go through the presentation, to go through slide by slide, to read the notes, and to do a little additional research so that you're really knowledgeable and confident when you go to teach. And again, that's why we want to recognize you as trainers, because there's a time commitment here for sure. One of the things we didn't do on our presentation, when I did this with you a few weeks ago, and I mentioned this frequently, but I can't have a dialogue with you this way. It's very difficult. But when you're with people, that's hugely important. So, you can dialogue, you can ask questions, and the more interactive you make it, the better the education will be. It always works that way. So if, during the presentation, if you can ask a question from the slide, or, ask them, so what do you think about this? Or what's your experience? Or have you seen somebody do this, etc. Ask them what they're doing in their restaurants, if they're comfortable talking about it. Tie it all together. That's a thing that we talked about a lot, which is, remember, everything is interconnected. We divide it into 7 days artificially. That theme about the fact that if we're talking about energy, we are also talking about waste and food. And if we're talking about food, we're also talking about water and energy and waste. I mean, everything is connected. So keep bringing that back. Like, for instance, when you're talking about waste, that has a direct impact on climate change. And climate change has a direct impact on how much food we're able to produce, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So everything fits together. How do you teach it? So, this is something that I'm really interested to get your feedback on. We taught it in 7 days. I think personally, that's probably the best way to do it, because it gives people time to digest. And we also know that as educators, typically after 45 minutes, 50 minutes, an hour, people's attention span isn't always what it should be. So if you can do it over 7 days, that would be great. They don't have to be 7 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday kind of thing. Maybe it's once a week. Maybe if you're doing chef meetings, it's once a month, and you do it over 7 months. However you wish to do it. But, and I guess if you have to do it in kind of one long day or 2 long days, do what you can. The important thing is we need to reach as many people as we can. And we would very much like to hear back from you what's working and what maybe didn't work. Share with us your success. Share with us where it didn't maybe work so well, because that's stuff we can share with everybody else. And Shona, I'm just a quick question. When you teach it, you said 4 hours a week. Is that 4 straight hours, or is that divided into 2 and 2?
No, it's 4 straight hours, because we're doing a practical component. Usually they're cooking, or they're doing a waste audit. So we take the garbage from one of the other labs without them knowing, and they take it into their own lab, and I give them gloves and aprons and masks and whatever, and they tear it all apart, and then they're appalled. I can't believe they put spoons in the garbage. And it's what they do as well, but they become so self-aware. It's an amazing thing to do. Walk into any kitchen and tear apart, do a waste audit of what could have been repurposed, what should have been recycled. And yeah, it's 4 hours, because you need the time for them to see and do, and then think a little more, and then look at the whole big picture again and bring it back together, right? So for me.
Shona, that's a really great comment. And for all of you on this, we intend this to be a short curriculum, but as we know, those of us in the culinary world, we learn most often by doing. That's how we learn. So if you can do things where you can stretch your class a little bit and do an activity, that's really impactful. And if you've ever, to your point, Shona, if you've ever torn apart the garbage, wow, it's amazing what you'll see in there. Absolutely.
It's even with like a chef's association, like at the end of the night, when everyone's had whatever you've had as a group meal, go through what's left over and say, what could we have done? Where could we have done measures for, pulling back on things? How could we be more energy efficient? Like, do it in ways that extends beyond just the teaching, and they take it with them, right?
And Shona, thank you, because I think that for chef societies, this curriculum can serve as the base education, right? Because I think you have to begin with an education, but I think you can do so much beyond this and incorporate this as an ongoing, discussion, because the reality of sustainability is it's not going away. I mean, things are not somehow getting better. Things are getting worse, and it will become more and more dire it just will. And so the information that we're teaching and hopefully empowering people, that will be more and more important in their professional and personal lives. So yeah, so it's ongoing. So thank you. So yeah, that brought me into the last bullet point here. Timing, yeah, it's roughly 45 minutes. And then I put a plus and a question mark, because If you have to sort of keep it to 45 minutes, you absolutely can. Um, but if you can do a little extra or have a longer discussion or ask more questions or maybe do some activity, by all means, please do so. All right, a few more teaching points. You have, when you receive the curriculum and all the materials, which by the way will probably be in a couple weeks or so because I'm still working on some revisions and I'm behind. There are notes pages that go along with each of the slides, and these are meant for you. They're meant for the instructor. It's not, I don't know if I would necessarily share it with the students. I mean, there's nothing there that's embarrassing or anything, but it's really there for you. And it's there for you to empower you as a teacher. There's ideas for activities, there's discussion points, there's talking points, there are resources. You'll see on some of the slides there's a whole bunch of websites where you can go to learn more about a specific activity, about a specific slide, etc. So feel free to share it if you want. Again, there's nothing confidential there. The websites that are embedded in those notes pages sometimes are really good to share, actually. So feel free to share those. I think of, for instance, with things like seafood, and that's such a complicated topic, but there are organizations in the world that do the research for us and tell us as chefs what we should or shouldn't be doing. Those are really important websites for us. And so feel free to share those. But again, lots of notes pages there. So encourage action. This is really something that is, again, at the end of every presentation. But let's be honest. If people are doing this and they kind of go, oh, that was nice, that was interesting, and then go back to their personal and professional lives and nothing changes, then it was a waste of time. And so please constantly ask them, what can you do? Or if you're doing this every week or month, maybe say, just, when we come back, I'd love for you to tell me what you've done in the last week with the information we just learned. And let them know that that's going to be an expectation. Encourage action, because the only way we make a difference is, knowledge is good, knowledge is the beginning, but it has to lead to action. Send us your stories. We're all in this together, and you are now part of our team, and we want to hear what works. We want to hear what doesn't work. The success stories, we want to publish them. We want to send them to the World Chef community. We want them to know what you're doing. We want to celebrate you, and we want to celebrate your activities. So please tell us. And again, like I said, if you're doing something and you tried it and it was just a disaster, send it to us. Now, we're not going to publish that. Don't worry. We're not going to be like, hey, look at Chef so-and-so in Miramar. That was a disaster. No, not at all. But we want to know, because that helps us maybe make a better presentation, and then maybe we brainstorm on that. So please let us know. Remember, small steps are positive. Again, this goes back to what Shona said, every decision matters, every choice matters. Keep reinforcing that, because sometimes there are people in this sustainability sort of world who really try to tell you that, you've got to do 100 things to be sustainable. And that actually isn't empowering. That actually tends to be, for many people, I could never do all that, so why even try? Please reinforce, even if you do something small, it's a step in the right direction. And what we've learned is that if you do something small, almost always you do another thing that's small and another thing that's small, and all of a sudden you're doing a lot. So please remind them often about that. And this is the last bullet point in this slide is a little bit about what makes good teaching. Be vulnerable. None of us are perfect. None of us are live a perfectly sustainable life. There is not a day that goes by with me in the United States where I see what comes from stores, and I'm like, why is there so much plastic on this? And why, all of this? you know, none of us are perfect. And so I think, it's okay to admit that. It's okay to admit to your students or tell them stories about, something that you realize that you were doing that was totally wrong. That's okay. And if a student asks you a question that you don't know the answer to, don't be afraid to say, I have no idea, but you know what? Let's try to find the answer. Vulnerability is a really, really good thing. Okay, so a couple more things. Please do not change the curriculum. If you really believe that you have something better, or if you really believe that you've got something that you think you should put in there or whatever, what I would ask is you please just send Lynn an email. Um, I'm by the way, we're all open to change. It's not like somehow this is, can never change. We just want to be sure, because this is a World Chefs Feed the Planet product with our name on it, that it doesn't go out and it's changed without us knowing. That's all. And by the way, if you have an idea, or if you see something that's maybe not right or whatever, please let us know. There's no egos here, so we're very happy to receive that information, because we always want to make it better. So no worries with that. Stay true to the content and to science. I've heard a lot of people say a lot of things, and sometimes they're absolutely not correct. And I want to be sure that, when you're talking about sustainability, that what you're saying is scientifically correct. Like, for instance, one of the ones I've heard many times is that, organic produce is just better for you. Unfortunately, there is absolutely no evidence for that. I mean, nothing. It is not more nutritious. It's better potentially for the ground and the environment, but for you personally, there is no evidence for that. So, it's just, let's be very, very sure that when we make comments, that we take the time to research them. And when you do, by the way, you can ask us questions by all means. And if we don't know, we'll try to find out the answers as well. Um, and if you're looking online, just please consider the source. There's a lot of sustainability information on the internet that is highly questionable. Consider the source, consider where it's coming from. Is it coming from the United Nations? Is it coming from, the Eat Lancet report? Is it coming from a reputable university? Those are the kind of sources you want to be looking at. We will be sending you a code of conduct. The code of conduct, we will need you to sign and return to us. It basically is just that, and it's really saying what we expect of you, because again, you are representing Worldchefs. At that point, we'll send you the curriculum and everything with it, and then go and teach. Remember, the shortened curriculum is an introduction. It is shortened. It is introductory. The longer curriculum is much more comprehensive. It's a much more deep dive, and there's a lot more information there. So, depending on what your circumstances are, if you have the ability to do the longer one, great. If, you're just like, look, the smaller one is really where we're at, great. Just remember that there are two different products out there. So we're here for you. I want you to please understand that you do not teach in a bubble, in your own little. We're here as a community. We're here to support you. So as you teach this, please know that you can send an email at any point and say, I don't know, I don't understand this, or I'm having a really hard time with this, or I got this really interesting question, or whatever. We're here for you, because together, and it's only together, we change the world. The only way we change the world is to empower a greater number of people, and that's the whole purpose for this. So remember the power of the white jacket, okay? That starts with you. We have the power to change the world, and let's not forget that. So be the example, and we will change the world. We have the power to do that. And I want to welcome you to the team, because you are now part of sort of a global team that's going out throughout the world. and teaching more and more people. And if we start to think a little bit about the effect that all of you can have, how many people can each one of you reach? And maybe some of them might consider being trainers. There's no doubt in my mind that we can reach thousands and thousands of people, but we only do it through each one of us doing our part. And you've elected to step forward and be a trainer and be part of this team. And I cannot be more appreciative of that and thankful. So we look forward to hearing your success stories. And before I open it up to questions, Shona, give us some of your great wisdom as somebody who has done a lot of this on the teaching side.
You'd be amazed how quickly people jump into this, right? You think they're not going to grasp it. The ideas are too big. They don't have time for it. But once they're inside of it and they realize that they can have impact, you have them and they want to be a part of it. Don't think the ideas are too big and too far reaching for you, because I honestly, 5 years ago, wouldn't even be able to properly define sustainability. And now I teach it and grow my curriculum every year and help make it more engaging as I can. And people are loving it. The students are loving it. The chefs are loving what's coming out as a graduate. They're mentioning that they're seeing, the change in the students and that they're less wasteful in the kitchen, because it was a big problem with graduates being so wasteful coming from our college. So it really does change who they are, and they jump on board really quickly. If the ideas get too big, break it down into something like, in the first day when I talk about the overarching idea of sustainability, it can be really overwhelming, and students can feel like or chefs can feel like they're getting lost in it. So I broke it down into the chicken and the egg. I made it really small. On the first day, they cook 5 types of eggs and 5 types of chickens, and they start to learn about sourcing food. And they just do a fried egg, just properly cooked, and they do a seared chicken breast and a sous vide chicken breast, and they taste them one against the other, and they start to understand their choices matter. So make it small, but they become really big ideas. And that's what's really worked well for me.
That's awesome. And you've also talked to chefs as well, not just your students.
Yeah. So
what's your experience been in talking to chefs?
So they're super excited about it, but don't feel they can do it. They don't feel they have the time. They don't feel they have the knowledge. They don't feel they have the capability to share it with their team. They want to do it so badly with all parts of their being, because we all want to save and do better and make better in our world. There's no chef that doesn't want to do that, but they don't feel they can. So I try and bring it, like I said, I bring it down to a level where it's just us. We're just talking about food and what we do and how we can impact it, right? And then start to talk about all the other pieces, and then like, hey, I could do that. So make small steps in the beginning.
I love that, because and I would agree with you. I've spoken to many chefs, and oftentimes the response I get is overwhelming, because chefs are just busy, obviously, and they go, oh, I don't have time to think about that. I don't have time to do that. And to your and the other side is they're really, many chefs are not really educated on this. And because remember that, to be a chef meant you've been in this business for a while, and maybe sustainability wasn't such a big thing when you were starting out.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're not really empowered. And I think one of the great things about the shortened curriculum is that it gives chefs that base knowledge, which they can then share with their staff.
Yeah.
So if they say, or by the way, or they can manage up, right? And so they can go to the management and say, hey, we need to be doing this.
Yeah.
But the other side of that is, and I think you said it really well, which is, when chefs tell me they're so busy, they can't do anything, then I always counter and just say, look, what could you do? What's one thing you could do? Could you, it's not that you have to start a comprehensive sustainability program. What's one thing you could do? And then they get hooked.
Yeah. There's a squirrel eating my plants. Sorry. I'm gonna have to sit my
squirrels are sustainable and local, by the way.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I know. And he's
and delicious.
Sorry.
Anyways, So
There's
I
questions here.
don't know if maybe there's some questions here. There was some
There
that
are.
just
There's four I haven't answered, or three or four I haven't answered.
okay. Here we go. How can we make it more integrate?
Kahoot is so much fun to use. Martin asked, how can you use
You
Kahoot or Flipgrid? I use that often, so often. If you're doing anything that's sort of a big idea, break it down into smaller pieces again, and then do a Kahoot live. Give them, you can use any device. It's super easy to use, and people get hopped up crazy about policies even doing Kahoot. It's, you take a dry subject, Kahoot will make it very engaging and exciting.
excellent. I have a question here from Heidi. Can you teach this if you're not a chef? I have a master's in food policy and I work with chefs. And what is the biggest challenge to get restaurants involved and excited about sustainability? Um, yes, you can teach this. Absolutely, you can teach this. And I would say you're probably very much uh, you
Qualified,
know,
yeah.
qualified, right? Thank you. It's early in the morning still. Qualified to, to do so. I think the biggest challenge for chefs is really what we were just talking about. And maybe, sometimes it's helpful for a chef to talk to a chef. But I think from your perspective, what I would think about doing is see if you can find a chef who could maybe teach it with you a little bit, or maybe a chef that you can have come with you that you can sort of look to and say, so chef, you're doing a bunch of stuff in your restaurant. Tell us about that, kind of thing. Or find examples of local chefs who are doing things. All right, hello from Argentina, but just for clarification, I'm Colombian. I love that. Um, both are wonderful countries. All right, I'm a teaching chef in a cooking school, and I want to include sustainability in the curriculum. But here they have a high, yes, consumption of beef. We were just talking about Argentina the other day, and it's not easy to tell Argentines to cut down on meat consumption. Any tips? Um, there is a restaurant that I just heard about in Argentina that is doing. Lynn, you were on that call. I think it's all plant-based or largely plant-based. I think what I would recommend is that there are countries, not just Argentina, where meat is absolutely front and center, and vegetables are kind of an afterthought. I think everything starts with education, and and I would say for the chef community, it's also about differentiation. So is there something you can do to differentiate your restaurant so it's different from all the other meat-focused restaurants? And that's not to say you have to be vegetarian, but how can you maybe make vegetables more interesting part of what you're doing? But it's a process. Would you agree with that, Shona?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely a process.
Okay. Hello, chefs. I've written an article about food waste for my school. If you're interested, yeah, send it over. Let's go. Love it. Thank you, Victoria. Um, Martin, special the current. Yes, agreed. Winston, hello, by the way. He's a rock star in the Philippines. Is it possible, chef, to include sustainability in our existing curriculum? For example, in Basic Culinary 101. What a great question that is. Yes, absolutely. When I was in the world of culinary education for a couple decades, what we would do is we would put sustainability right in the beginning of the curriculum. And the reason for that is that then we would reinforce it in all the classes afterwards. It can't be the kind of thing where you teach it once and then you forget about it. It has to really be a core competency, just like hygiene is a core competency, right? You teach about how important it is to wash your hands and all of that. Imagine if after that you said, if they went to the kitchen and you went, don't worry about washing your hands. No, you reinforce hygiene in and so in the same way, you reinforce sustainable practices in all of the classes you do, as a discussion, as, looking at waste, portion size, etc. So if you can do it, yes. Now, I'll give you another thought here. And the thought is, because we shorten this curriculum, and I know that in culinary schools, a lot of times the problem is, you're full. Your curriculum is full. It's not that you have just don't know what to do with your time, right? I mean, the time is all accounted for. but maybe it's something where you could do, like, I don't know, over, 2 or 3 days, maybe a little extra time where you do like 2 hours on a Saturday or 2 hours in the afternoon or something, um, right in the beginning. That's why we made this shortened, so it can fit inside your curriculum better. Hopefully that's helpful. But yes, I would recommend doing it right in the beginning. Shona, would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, we put a small, when we put the curriculum in to the fourth semester, which is their graduating semester, we put a little bit in the first semester so they start to understand what the word means, how they can do it in the kitchens that they're in. Second semester, they start to develop ideas in menu planning and how they can do, do engineering of menus and how that can be sustainable. And then by the time they get to fourth, they already understand a definition of the word, but we flesh it out into the broader scope.
Is your dog going after the squirrels?
Yes, sorry. I opened the door, that's why I left. I planted everything. I lose all my plants.
This is what happens when we're all working from home.
Yep. Sorry. I'm gonna mute.
And pretty soon my dogs are going to hear your dogs, and that's going to get going. So anyways, I think that's all the questions we had, and I want to be sure that we are respectful of time because this is for an hour. But you will be getting, the code of conduct shortly, and then you will be getting the curriculum hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Like I said, I'm making some changes to the notes, and I'm behind schedule. But I just want to thank you once again for taking the time. I cannot wait to see what you do. I can't wait. And I can't wait to report back to our partners and say, there were 35 people and they went out, and in the first 6 months, we taught 800 people around the world. That's just incredible. Hang on, one more question here. Would teaching this as a class lead to a sustainability club in post-secondary? Or yeah, absolutely. And how could we tie this to Worldchefs? That's a really interesting question.
You can
And
make
one
them ambassadors, right? You can make them
what
you can make them ambassadors once they're certified for doing it in the post-secondary. And then in the club, you have ambassadors that start to share the idea, right?
Well, and the other thing there is, how you could tie your students to Worldchefs. There is, like I said, there's, once we're, the COVID thing is a little bit of an issue at the moment, obviously. But, assuming hoping that sort of becomes more under control, there is that whole Food Heroes program in which, people, teach school kids. There's no reason in the world that culinary students couldn't do that also.
Yeah,
And
we did that with, once my class had graduated from January to March, we took them out and did a Food Heroes with an elementary school, and they taught them, right? Which was great.
that's
Yeah.
super cool. And so, Brian, that's another way for them to get linked up. The other thing, Brian, send us your success stories, please. I mean, I would love to, publish it. I would love to get testimonials from students who have done it. I'd love to, hear from one of your students about, hey, I'm so-and-so from so-and-so, and after doing this, I did this, this, and this. And I would love to get those feedback, and we'll publish it to the Worldchefs community. Absolutely. So with that, I'm going to draw this to a close. Shona, thank you for joining us. The amazing Lynn, who is joining us from the moon. Gosh, thank you for taking the time to join us from outer space. Lynn makes all this happen in Paris, actually. And oh, by the way, thank you. And I forgot to put this in my presentation. Can we translate it into our mother language? Absolutely. Please send us a copy when you do. Absolutely. This does not have to be taught in English. There is a Spanish translation, by the way. There may be more to come. But if you translate it, please share it with us. But I just want to say a huge thank you for that question, because the idea is get this to as many people as we possibly can. That's the big reason for doing it. So if you want to go ahead and change it, do it, please. Done my PhD research in culinary. Yeah, oh my goodness. That's super cool. Thank you, Chef. All right, with that, Lynn, do you have any comments?
No, I just want to let every trainer who's joining this call that I will be sending follow-up emails, so you will have all the information you need from me. And if you have any question, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you. Lynn, is it hard to breathe in outer space?
I'm trying so hard right now.
Oh, all right. We also have fun at Feed the Planet. So, guys, to everybody on this webinar on Zoom call, thank you very much for joining us. It really made my day. So, have a great day.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.